أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري وأحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي اللهم افتح علينا حكمتك وانشر علينا رحمتك يا ذا الجلال والإكرام اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا من فضلك علما وتعليما وبعد. So we're going to inshallah finish the book during the month of Ramadan. This is our first session. Ramadan Kareem to everyone. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow us to benefit from these precious days and weeks ahead during this most blessed month. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow us to put into application what it is that Imam al-Ghazali has written in his book. As a means of drawing near to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala during this month, it's a month of opportunity. So let's do our best to take advantage of it. We have about 60 pages left. So that means that we have to go through around 15 pages per day or per session. And the new time, of course, is Saturday at 2 p.m. is when we'll start. So we pray Dhuhr at 1:45 or so, and then we'll try to begin around 2. So the sessions might be a little bit longer than usual. We might end up going till like 3:15 or so, 3:30ish. Another housekeeping item is I have posted the assignments in terms of the description of the assignments. All of the assignments are due at the end of the term. So you can take your time doing them. If you want to do them one after the other and space yourself out, time yourselves accordingly, then that's fine. The reason why it's at April 30th is because that's basically the end of the term, and then the new term starts in May. And the final exam has been scheduled for April the 29th, which is a Saturday. So it's an in-person exam, and so we'll come here and you'll have 2 hours to write it. It won't be difficult. It will basically ask some general questions from the different sections of the book, and there will also be a reflection piece. For the final exam, you have a choice of writing it either handwritten, I'll have hard copies available, or digitally. So if you will have a laptop or something that you want to bring so that you can type the exam, then I'll make the file available for you on the day of. But it would help just to know in advance what it is that you're doing, if you want to do it as written, or if you want to do it on your device. And for those who need an accommodation, meaning that you don't that particular date does not work for you, then let me know and we can make some alternate arrangements. Bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. So the last time we began part 2, which is on the al-qawlu fi ijtinab al-ma'asi, what is stated on refraining from disobedience. And we talked about the sins committed with the limbs. So the beginning of this section, Imam al-Ghazali talks about the 7 different limbs that a person sins with, and all of the limbs are inroads to the heart. So the second part of this chapter speaks of the sins of the heart. So we're going to finish going through the limbs today, and he mentioned the 7 limbs. That the eye, the ear, the tongue, the hands, the feet, the stomach, and the private parts. So last time we stopped at him naming the 7 different limbs, and so we begin on page 92 with the eye. So he starts with, as for the eye, it was created for you only so that you might be guided by it in the darkness, that you might be helped by it with respect to your needs, that by it you might see the wonders in the dominion of the heavens and earth and consider the signs they contain. So when talking about the eye, when he says it's about fulfilling your hajat, this is talking about both this worldly and next worldly, right? So dunyawi and ukhrawi, right? Or also, dunyawi and dini, so to speak, right? And so the idea here is that when it comes to the eyes as being, one of the great blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that we use it in order to come to know Him better through contemplating the wonders of the dominions of the heavens and the earth. And we know that the eyesight, it's one of the quickest inroads to the heart, right? And so there are hadiths of the Prophet ﷺ which talk about, the unlawful or lustful glance is like the poisonous arrows of the shaitan. And so it's imperative that, a person is very cautious and wary of what it is that they look at, because it's the quickest inroad to the heart. So he said, protect your eye from 4 things. 1, from looking at a marriageable person of the opposite gender. 2, from looking at a beautiful form in a lustful way. 3, from looking at a Muslim with an eye of disdain. And 4, from being on the lookout for another Muslim's faults. So each one of these are, considered as sins, right? So when a person looks at a member of the opposite gender with a sense of lust, then this is, something that is prohibited because it can lead to other greater sins. And so it's talking about, the marriageable person, meaning the non-mahram. So somebody that a person would be able to marry, or even if they're not able to marry based on hukm. So for example, we're not allowed to marry idolaters, right? So it doesn't mean that, there's a woman who, doesn't believe in God, or an atheist, and she's beautiful, that it's okay for us to look at because we can't marry her. No, that's not what is meant here. But anyone that is a non-mahram, meaning that somebody that I would, is not directly related to yourself. And it applies for men and women, okay? So this is not, a lot of times we just think of this as, men towards women, but the verses in the Quran are very clear that it's a command to the men to lower their gaze, and it's and protect their private parts, and it's a commandment to the women as well, the believing women, in order to lower their gaze and protect their private parts. The second, from looking at a beautiful form in a lustful way. And so then in Arabic it says وَإِلَى صُورَةٍ مَلِيحَةٍ بِشَهْوَةِ نَفْسٍ. So here surah, it's translated as form, but it really is, anything that is visual in terms of as a picture. So not a person, but any sort of form. So whether it's a picture or whatnot, and there are plenty of examples of what is impermissible to look at when it comes to pictures. We know that pornography is a major problem within our societies, whether here or overseas or wherever. And the access to it is something that really is unprecedented in our times. That people, they have access to it on their devices, that they can carry with them wherever they go. And so you have to be very, very vigilant in that respect, because it can cause so much harm and damage, to the heart. And this is, not just looking at it from within our faith tradition, but I mean there's academics who have written about the harms, the societal harms of pornography, and this is something that is really a major disease within our societies. And so that's something that would fall definitely under number 2. Number 3, it says from looking at a Muslim with an eye of disdain. أو تنظر بها إلى مسلم بعين الاحتقار. So ihtiqar, it has to do with looking at somebody with a sense of resentment or hatred or belittling, right? And so it says here that not to look at a Muslim even if they're corrupt, right? So, this is somebody who has the hurma or the sanctity of Islam, is somebody that, should be protected by from all other Muslims. And this also applies to even non-Muslims. Okay, so sometimes people might think, oh, why is it only for Muslims? No, but even, in the commentary of Imam al-Faqih, he mentioned, that the dhimmi, right? So somebody who is under the protection of the Muslim governance, that you're not allowed to look at them either in this sort of way, because the idea is any form of harm that would come, to them by looking at them with an eye of disdain. And this is something that, again, it reaches to the heart. These are sins that a person commits, that even though, you're doing it with the physical, but it's something that has an impact on the level of the hearts as well. And then the fourth one is from being on the lookout for another Muslim's faults. So we know that this is something that, there are many different hadiths of the Prophet ﷺ that have to do with finding faults in other people, that it's prohibited. You should not be looking and trying to find faults, towards other people. So there's a hadith in that Imam al-Tirmidhi, rahimahullah, that he records that one time the Prophet ﷺ, he got up on the minbar and he said, "Ya ma'ashara man قد أسلم بلسانه ولم يفضي الإيمان إلى قلبه لا تؤذوا المسلمين ولا تعيروهم ولا تتبعوا عوراتهم." So he said, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, that after he got up on the minbar, so this is to indicate that this is a khitab to everyone that's there. He ascended the minbar and he called out with a raised voice, indicating this is a message that you must take seriously. He said, "Oh, you who have accepted Islam with his tongue while faith has not reached his heart," right? So this is like, it's an address to everyone. So people that, we claim and we say the Shahada that we're Muslim by our tongues, but at times we might not be in that state of Iman, because not every Muslim is a mu'min. Not every Muslim is a believer, right? Because it's a higher state of being. And so the Prophet ﷺ is saying, "Oh, you who have accepted Islam with his tongue while faith has not reached his heart. Do not harm the Muslims, nor revile them, nor spy on them to expose their secrets." So this is tatabbu awratihim, right? That if a person is trying to, seek out another person's faults by exposing them, by spying on them, and it's so easy to do this in terms of, especially with social media in this age, where people, they can go and they can, try to find, quote unquote dirt on other people, for the purpose, of exposing them. And so this is something that is very harmful to oneself, especially, not just to the person that you're exposing, but to oneself. And the Prophet ﷺ, he continued, فَإِنَّهُ مَنْ تَتَبَّعَ عَوْرَةَ أَخِيهِ الْمُسْلِمِ تَتَبَّعَ اللَّهُ عَوْرَتَهُ وَمَنْ تَتَبَّعَ اللَّهُ عَوْرَتَهُ يَفْضَحْهُ وَلَوْ فِي جَوْفِ رَحْلِهِ. So the Prophet ﷺ continued, and he said that whoever indeed tries to expose the faults of his Muslim brother or sister, to expose their secrets, Allah will expose their faults. Allah will expose his secrets, making them wide open, even if they were in the depth of his house. So the narrator of this hadith is Ibn Umar radiallahu anhu. And so Ibn Umar radiallahu anhu, it says, this is part of the narration, that he looked at the Kaaba. ونظر ابن عمر يوما إلى البيت أو إلى الكعبة فقال ما أعظمك وأعظم حرمتك والمؤمن أعظم حرمة عند الله منك. So that Ibn Umar, he said that one day he looked at the Kaaba and he said, what is it that is more honored than you, and whose honor is more sacred than yours, looking at the Kaaba? But then he said, and by Allah, that the believer's honor is more sacred to Allah than yours, to the Kaaba. So the mu'min, the believer, has a higher honor, a higher status with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala than the Kaaba. And so beware of trying to expose the faults of other believers. Beware of that, right? Because this is something that is extremely serious in that regard. He goes on then to say, as for the ear, protect it from listening to reprehensible innovations, backbiting, lewd talk, delving into falsehood, or talking about the faults of others. For verily the ear was created for you only to listen to the speech of Allah Most High, to the sunnah of His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, to the wisdom of the friends of Allah, and so that by it you might gain access to the benefits of knowledge by which you may reach the eternal dominion and everlasting bounty. So when he talks about the ear and protecting it, the first thing that he mentions is from listening to ila al-bid'ah, right? And so bid'ah here is reprehensible innovation. The scholars have talked about the different forms of bid'ah, right? And that bid'ah falls into one of the 5 categories of Islamic rulings. So you have the bid'ah that is wajib, you have the bid'ah that is mandub or recommended, you have the bid'ah that is mubah, that is permissible, you have the bid'ah that is makruh, and you have the bid'ah that is haram or reprehensible, right? And so it's speaking about the last one, of the reprehensible bid'ah. And this is, when we're talking about the bid'ahs, I mean, there have been a number of different works that have been written about, dividing bid'ahs into these different categories. And so sometimes, people, they'll quote the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that kullu bid'atin dalala wa kullu dalalatin fi an-nar, that every bid'ah is an innovation, is a misguide, is something that misguides, and every misguidance is in the fire. But there are several examples of things that exist within Islamic history that are bid'ahs, but they're not of the reprehensible kind. So, for example, when you're looking at a bid'ah that is considered as obligatory, was the development of Arabic language, the science of Arabic language. Why was that something that was obligatory, of nahu, right, and sarf? Because that had to do with the preservation of the Quran and the Sunnah, right? And so that science, that development, was not something that existed explicitly in the time of the Prophet ﷺ or in the first generation, right? It was implicit. And so when the scholars would write about it, and then they would make it explicit in terms of delineating that science and any of the sciences that preserve our faith, it's linguistically a bid'ah. That technically it's a bid'ah because it's something that never existed in the past. It's an innovation in that regard. But it's something that is considered as wajib. From the bid'ahs that are considered as recommended or that are mandub, that are praiseworthy, would be like, for example, schools. They never had schools in the time of the Prophet ﷺ in terms of the kutab and to be able to learn the different sciences, etc. And so, this is what the scholars, they mention, or Salat al-Taraweeh in terms of the way that it's done in Jama'ah, 20 rak'ahs, right? This is something that was not in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, but came afterwards in the time of Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu. And so, and when it comes to the bid'ahs that might be considered as makruh, would be like the ornamentation of the mosques, right? So that's a bid'ah that was never done, obviously, in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, but it's not something that would be considered as sinful or reprehensible. And then of course the bid'ahs that are impermissible would be, listening to those who, they have creeds that are misguided, right? So whether it's like the Mu'tazila, or whether it's like the Qadiriyas or whatnot, the different sects that had problematic aspects of their creed, listening to them would be something that would be deemed as impermissible. And so this is this categorization is from scholars like Sultan al-Ulama Izz ibn Abd al-Salam, or Imam al-Nawawi, or Ibn Athir, or Ibn Hajar Asqalani, and others. And so this is not something that is considered as from like a fringe group of scholars or something. No, these are mainstream, or these are giants within our faith tradition. In terms of backbiting, he'll go into that. In terms of the section on the tongue, but listening to backbiting is also, it's impermissible. Lewd talk, anything that is considered as transgressing boundaries, delving into falsehood, talking about the faults of others. So this is another aspect that is similar to the eye, that you can look for the faults of others, you can also listen to the faults of others. right? So it's impermissible to do that. So the ear was created to listen to the speech of Allah Most High and the Sunnah of His Messenger Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and to the awliya, the friends of Allah, so that you may gain access to benefits of knowledge. That's what the ear is for, so that we can gain knowledge in order for us to implement it, in order for us to be able to attain nearness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, with the end result being eternal and everlasting bounty. So if you use it to listen to something disliked, the makarih, then what was in your favor will be against you. And what was meant to be a reason for your success will become a reason for your destruction. This is the ultimate loss. So don't take this thing for granted, where just it's okay, you're just listening to whatever, and that it doesn't have an impact. No, it will have an impact on you. Also, do not think that the sin will be attributed only to the one who speaks it, and not to the one who listens. For verily it is said in a narration, إِنَّ الْمُسْتَمِعَ شَرِيكُ الْقَائِلِ وَهُوَ أَحَدُ الْمُغْتَابَيْنِ. So this is a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, in which truly the listener shares in sin with the speaker, and he is one of the two backbiters. Now he goes into the tongue. Now the tongue, there's a law, because this is something that it's one of the easiest things to slip in and we mentioned this previously in terms of the pitfalls of the tongue. So he goes into detail now. It was created for you only, so that you could spend much time in the remembrance of Allah Most High and in recitation of His book, that you could guide Allah's creature to His way, and that you express your needs in worldly and religious matters. If you then use it for other than what it was created for, you have been ungrateful for Allah's blessing. The tongue is the part of the body most able to overpower both you and other creatures. People are thrown into hell on their faces for anything more than the harvests of their tongue. So that's based on a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ of Mu'adh ibn Jabal, in which it's a lengthy hadith that where the Prophet ﷺ enumerated all the different aspects of Islam, and all talking about even the fasting being a shield, and talking about the prayer as being the pillar of the deen, right? And he said at the end of it, shall I not tell you what is controlling all of these, right? And so then Mu'adh, he said, yes, indeed, tell me, Ya Rasulullah. And he said, Kuf alayka hadha. He held his tongue and he said, restrain this. And so that shocked Mu'adh. And he's like, are we going to be held accountable for the things that we say? And that's when the Prophet ﷺ, he said this statement, and he said, your mother has lost you. فَكَلَتْكَ أُمُّكَ يَا مُعَاذ. And then he goes on, to say that وَلَا يَكُبُّ النَّاسُ ولا يكب الناس في النار على مناخيرهم إلا حصائد ألسنتهم. That people aren't thrown into the fires except by the harvest of their tongues. That it's a means by which a person can be thrown, into the fire. And so he said, struggle to gain victory over your tongue with all your might, lest it throw you onto your face into a pit of hell. For it has been narrated in a hadith that verily a man might utter a single word, and for this one word he is hurled to the depths of hell a distance of 70 years. This is huge. This is major, right? That, إِنَّ الْعَبْدَ لَا يَتَكَلَّمَ بِالْكَلِمَةٍ مِّنْ رِضْوَانِ اللَّهِ يَرْفَعُهُ اللَّهُ بِهَا دَرَجَاتٍ. That the Prophet ﷺ, he said that a person might say something without giving it much consideration, not thinking about, the impact of their words, but it's something that's so good that it raises up a person degrees with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But the opposite also applies. وَإِنَّمَا يَتَكَلَّمُ الْعَبْدُ بِالْكَلِمَةِ مِنْ سَخَطِ اللَّهِ يَهْوِي بِهَا إِلَى جَهَنَّمْ وَفِي رِوَايَةٍ إِلَى جَهَنَّمْ 70 خَرِيفًا. Right? That and a person might say something unknowingly, not thinking of it, لا يلقي لها بالا, doesn't give it consideration, but it's from the displeasing things to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, min sakhatillah, and that the result of them saying that thing, that it brings a person down into the depths of the fire 70 years. Now you might think, well, why? Why is that so? Right? It's because what happens is that when a person says something with their tongue and they don't realize what it is that they're saying, and it goes unaccounted for in their minds. But that hisab, it continues, right, to the day of judgment. That they continue to earn sin because they're not making tawbah from it, right? And so the effect and the impact of that remains throughout the rest of the person's life. So you can imagine if you've been saying things, if we've been saying things, and we're not taking it to account, and we're not making tawbah from it, right? And then it just, the record, it keeps on building up, and you continue to acquire more and more sayyat. This is frightening. And so it's like, well, why is it such a huge punishment? 70 years, 70 kharifa, for saying something unwittingly, unknowingly, not giving it much consideration. But this is the power of the tongue. Understand, our faith is based on words. Literally. Our faith is based on words. In fact, what do we call the shahada? What is it called? Kalima. What is the kalima? La ilaha illallah Muhammadun Rasulullah. Kalima, literally, singular word, even though it's a statement, but it's to show that this is the impact. The entire universe, the heavens and the earth, everything was created based on this one kalima. La ilaha illallah Muhammadun Rasulullah. Powerful, right? And so our deen is qala Allah wa qala Rasulullah. The words of Allah, the Quran, it's based on words. The words of the Messenger, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, based on words. Doesn't end there, it doesn't stop there. That's the basis, that's the foundation. But you have to understand the words appropriately, and then you have to implement them accordingly, right? So it doesn't stop at the words. I have to understand La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. Not just say it, that's the beginning. But in order for me to be able to get the fruit and the benefit from it, I have to understand it, and I have to practice it. I have to put it into implementation. And there's so many hadiths of the Prophet ﷺ that are related to the tongue and verses of the Quran. وَقُلْ لِعِبَادِي يَقُولُ الَّتِي هِيَ أَحْسَنُ. Say to my servants to say that which is ahsan, which is most beautiful, which is best. The Prophet ﷺ said, كُلُّ كَلَامِ ابْنَ آدَمْ عَلَيْهِ لَا لَهُ إِلَّا أَمْرًا بِمَعْنُوفٍ أَوْ نَهْيًا عَنْ مُنْكَرٍ أَوْ ذِكْرًا لِلَّهِ تَعَالَى. That every word that the human being says, it counts against them, not for them. That's the default. Everything you say is against you, except, then there are exceptions. Commanding to that which is good, forbidding that which is evil, and remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now people might say, well, how is, if I see a brother or a sister, I say, how are you? How is that something that is considered as dhikr, or commanding to good, or forbidding evil? But when I say that there's a benefit in it in terms of asking about the hal, asking about the state of another person, as a means of bringing the hearts closer together, as a means of da'wah, as a means of, at the end of the day, there's a connection to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through that. And so that is considered as a form of remembrance of Allah, because I'm saying it for a purpose. I'm saying it for a reason, right? In order to check on other people, as a means that this is what Allah has commanded me to do, right? This is part of the sunnah of our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, to ask about the well-being of others. But how heedless are we that we're in a state of ghafla when it comes to the things that we say, right? We have to be more aware and cognizant of what it is that we say. A martyr was killed in battle, and someone said of him, how lucky he is, he has earned paradise. And the Prophet ﷺ, he said, how do you know? It may be that he used to speak of that which did not concern him, or was miserly over things which were of no benefit to him in any way. So imagine this. I mean, somebody is in a battle, and they're fighting for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then they get killed, right? It's martyrdom. It's a high status, right? And so then one of the Sahaba said, he's got paradise. And the Prophet ﷺ asked him, he said, how do you know that? How can you be so sure? Maybe he talked about things that weren't of his concern. That's dangerous, because it's a preventative for him going into paradise. That he spoke about, وَمَا يُدْرِيكَ لَعَلَّهُ كَانَ يَتَكَلَّمُ فِي مَا لَا يَعْنِي. He was talking about things that were of none of his business. مِنْ حُسْنِ إِسْلَامِ الْمَرْءِ تَرْكُهُ مَا لَا يَعْنِي. Right? That, from the excellence of a person's Islam is to leave that which does not, concern them, right? And so even, when the Prophet ﷺ was saying in another narration about, يَتَكَلَّمُ بِالْكَلِمَةِ, one of the narrations it says, لِيُضْحِكَ بِهَا النَّاسِ أو لِيُضْحِكَ بِهَا أَصْحَابَهُ, right? That a person, he says something, not giving it much consideration, in order so that he can make his friends laugh, or to make people laugh, right? Because we don't take it seriously. It's like, I'll just say a joke and to make people laugh, and right? And it could be something that is inappropriate or whatever, and people don't think about that. It's like, okay, so what? Big deal, But you have to have taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in terms of your tongue, right? And this is something that, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he indicated in a hadith in which in the morning all of the limbs of the body, they shake, and then they say to the tongue, ittaqillah fina, have taqwa of Allah in terms of us, right? That this is something that it's very, very powerful, right? And this is a hadith that Imam al-Tirmidhi, he narrates, عن أبي سعيد الخدري قال, and this is related to the Messenger of Allah, إذا أصبح ابن آدم فإن الأعضاء كلها تكفر اللسان فتقول اتق الله فينا فإنما نحن بك فإن استقمت استقمنا وإن اعوججت اعوججنا, right? That when the human being wakes up in the morning, all of his body parts, they bow to the tongue and they say, fear Allah regarding us. Fear Allah regarding us. We are only part of you. If you are straight, the tongue, if it's straight, we are straight. If you are crooked, we are crooked, right? So it's to show the impact that what it is that our statements and what our tongues can say. And that's why Imam al-Nawawi rahimahullah dedicated so much of his Kitab al-Adhkar, right? The second biggest section in his book is on Hifz al-Lisan. So he said, protect your tongue from 8 things. Number 1, lying. Guard your tongue from lying, both in seriousness and in jest. Do not let it get accustomed to lying in jest, leading you to do so in earnest. Indeed, lying is one of the breeding grounds of the deadly sins. Moreover, if you have become known for lying, people will lose confidence in your word, mistrust you, and look down upon you. If you wish to understand how despicable it is to lie, look at the lying of others. Consider how repelled you feel by it, your disdain for the person who lies, and your judgment of his action as immoral. Do this with all of your faults, for you cannot know the ugliness of your own faults except by seeing them in others. Most certainly then, what you have found repugnant in others, they will find equally repugnant in you. So do not be content with these faults in yourself. So this is a strategy that he's giving in terms of you recognizing the ugliness of your actions, whether it's with what you speak or what you say, or your other faults or actions or shortcomings, is look at when you see them in other people and you're not only not impressed, but you're bothered, you're disgusted by it. This is like, it's repugnant, it's something that's repulsive, right? So just as you find it repulsive in these actions in other people, these shortcomings, then by more right you should find them repulsive within yourself. But you have to be aware. You have to be conscious of it. When we look at the definition of lying, lying, it has to do with saying that which is other than reality, right? Something that is not the truth, or something that it's not as it actually is, right? إخبار بخلاف الواقع. That's the definition, right? الكذب is إخبار بخلاف الواقع. So how things are, you mention something that is other than that, right? And so there can be a moral judgment attached to that or not, based on whether a person intends to do that purposely or unintentionally. Because sometimes, there were people that would say something that is simply not true, and they don't know that it's not true. They would say كذب فلان, right? He lied. Now, lying, of course, in English, when we hear about somebody lying, that there's like a sort of the moral aspect to it, that he's doing something that is wrong or bad, right? But if he doesn't know or she doesn't know, and they're saying something that it didn't actually happen, right? Then that moral aspect is not necessarily linked to it. But if a person intends by it to lie, to say something in order for some personal gain or something of that sort, then it becomes more problematic. And so even when joking, right, it's something that we have to be aware to avoid, and that we don't want to end up acquiring sin from it. The second, breaking a promise. Beware of ever promising something and not keeping your promise. Rather, let your goodness toward people be in the realm of action without the need for words. But if you are forced to make a promise, then be careful not to break it, unless you are incapable of fulfilling it, or you have to do so out of absolute necessity. For indeed, breaking a promise is among the signs of hypocrisy and repugnant character. The Prophet ﷺ said that there are three qualities which, if they lie hidden within a person, render him a hypocrite, even if he fasts and prays. When he speaks, he lies. When he makes a promise, he breaks his promise. And when he is given a trust, he betrays. So that's a well-known hadith in terms of the description of the munafiqun, or those who have a khisal. They have a trait or a characteristic of nifaq, and until they get rid of it. So part of it is that if a person makes a promise, there's a hadith, the Prophet ﷺ, he said, if a man promised something to his brother and his intention was to be true to his word, but he was incapable of fulfilling his promise, then there is no sin on him. So there's an idea of, if I'm going to make a promise, but then I'm unable to fill it for circumstances outside of my capacity, right? Then there's no ithm. Whereas if I'm able to fulfill it and I don't, and I break my promise, right, then it's a problem, and a person acquires sin, from that, and it's one of the traits of hypocrisy. And so if a person, makes a wa'd, right, awfu bil uhud, right, awal wu'ud, that also in terms of the commandment that when they make a promise, when they are giving their word, that they fulfill it, right? And so this is something that is imperative, and it's one of the traits and characteristics of a believer. Number 3. Now this one is a long one, because it's very, very serious and it needs to be unpacked, and it's ghiba. Okay, we've talked about this before in terms of backbiting, but this is something that is extremely serious. So what is backbiting? Backbiting is ذِكْرُ أَخَاكَ بِمَا يَكْرَهُ. That's the prophetic definition, is to mention your brother that if they were to hear it, they would dislike it. That's the definition. If you say something about somebody that they were to hear it and they would not like it. So this is funny in a sense that even if it's involving praise. So if you talk about somebody that, and you praise them in such a way, and that person were to hear it and they would like, I don't want that to be said about me. I don't like that, right? Then that can actually fall into a form of ghiba. Because the definition is, if the person were to hear it, they would dislike it, right? Yes.
What if your job is something like this, where you're doing like a human resources
Right.
position, and there's like, and doing what I do too. There's a lot of
Yeah.
So,
Thank God there are exceptions. Okay, we'll get to that. There are exceptions, right? All right. I know. This is like Imam Ghazali, style. You throw things out to like strike the person, frighten them to bits, right? Just so that they understand the seriousness of it. It is serious, right? But there are exceptions for it, and he'll talk about a few of these in a moment. So he said, restrain your tongue from backbiting, for backbiting is a sin more severe for a Muslim than 30 acts of adultery. This is based on a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ in terms of the sin of backbiting, that Imam al-Bayhaqi he relates that al-ghiba ashaddu min az-zina. That's a prophetic hadith. Al-ghiba ashaddu min az-zina. And so then the Sahaba who was hearing this from the Prophet ﷺ, he said, how? Kayf? And so then the Prophet ﷺ, he said, الرجل يزني ثم يتوب فيتوب الله عليه. That a person commits adultery and then they make repentance, and so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala repents to them. وإن صاحب الغيبة لا يغفر له حتى يغفر له صاحبه. But the one who commits ghiba, they backbite another person, right? That sin remains, and it continues to remain until the person that he spoke ill about forgives them. So you can imagine the impact. Again, you say something, and then it keeps building up. You keep getting written, sayyat, until the day of judgment, because that person never forgave you. That person that you were backbiting never forgave you, right? And so, you can imagine the sins that a person would be acquiring unknowingly, simply because they're unaware of the reality of those sins, right? So this is something that it's frightening, but here that's the understanding, that backbiting is a sin, more severe for a Muslim than 30 acts of adultery. So beware, right? Like this is real. This is serious. The meaning of backbiting is that you make mention of someone in a way that he would dislike it if he were to hear it. So there's the definition. Doing so makes you a backbiter and a wrongdoer, even if what you say is true, right? Because when the Prophet ﷺ said that, the Sahaba, they said, what if it's true? And the Prophet ﷺ said, that is backbiting, right? So if a person, they're wearing something that looks funny, or their walk is funny, or the way that they talk is funny, and you mention that, making fun of them behind their back, right? Oh, look at the way that this person's hairdo is, or something like that, right? And then they're backbiting, and it's just like, the person doesn't, if they were to hear it, they wouldn't like it, they would detest it, right? But then, the Prophet ﷺ, he confirmed, that is backbiting. But if it's not true, then it's called buhtan. It's double the sin, because it's not only you're backbiting, you're lying on top of it. You're saying something that is not the truth, right? So that's even worse. Buhtan is calumny, right? And so doing so makes you a backbiter and a wrongdoer, even if what you said is true. Beware of the kind of backbiting that is committed by reciters who are showing off. So the Qur'an, that those who recite the Qur'an without proper understanding of its deeper meaning, or apply its counsels to their behavior and conduct, right? So this is something that is very problematic in that regard, because the idea here is they're reading the Qur'an, they're reciting the words that are prohibiting them from doing acts that Allah has prohibited, right? And then they go and they commit it. So this is something that is even worse, right? This form of backbiting is that you make your meaning understood indirectly, saying, for example, may Allah rectify him. I am truly saddened by what has happened to him, and it has worried me. I ask Allah to rectify both us and him. Now, this is something that you find that people, we say it a lot, right? So that say aslah Allahu sha'nahu, right? So you say, oh, may Allah rectify him, right? Now, sometimes there's an implication behind that. It's not a dua in the sense that may Allah make him righteous. It's to point out that, okay, he's doing something that is wrong, and I'm not doing it, and so may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala rectify him and make him correct him. But it's a subtle way of insinuating that somebody is off the wayward, that they're doing bad, right? It's a subtle way, but even that is considered as backbiting, right? Because you're insinuating that that this person is X, Y, or Z. So you have to really check your hearts in this regard, and so it's like you're backbiting about this person, but you're doing it in an indirect way, and that's what Imam al-Ghazali is warning about. Now, if you're sincere and you're making dua, oh Allah, guide him, then that's not backbiting. There's no problem in that, right? So the statement is the same, but what's different? It's the intention, right? That's what's going on here. Because if I'm saying Allah yahdih, right, in a way that he's doing all these horrible things, and that's my intention. I'm backbiting, right? Because it's subtle, but that's why. But if I really mean Allah yahdi, yani, that, Allah yuslah sha'nahu, sincerely, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala rectify his affair without, with the intention of, sort of pointing out his wrongs and et cetera, et cetera. I mean, it's very subtle. And so there are a lot of subtleties that exist here that it's important that we become aware of within our own selves so that we don't end up, falling trapped to these things. Did you have a question?
And that's what you're saying to somebody else?
Yeah, about somebody else, yeah. Because what happens is that, if I'm talking with a brother and I look at somebody over there and I say, Allah yahdi, right? May Allah rectify his affair. It's subtle, right? And the person doesn't hear it. If I want to make dua for them, guess what? How do I remove the backbiting from it? Do it alone, right? In the middle of the night, nobody's around, Allah hears you. Allahumma aslah sha'nahu. Allahumma hadi. Allahumma aghfir lahu. Right? That's totally different. Then khalas, you're removing any possibility that you're backbiting. Because remember, with backbiting, it takes two people. The sayer and the listener. Right? So if you're really sincere about making dua for this person, I don't have to mention it to another person. I don't have to say, Allah yahdi, may Allah rectify his affair. Right? Insinuating that, he's doing something that's wrong. I don't have to tell somebody that. Make dua for him on your own. Right? Remove yourself from that possibility. Right? And falling into that trap. Yeah, again, what's the intention behind that? If the intention behind that, it's about, trying to talk about an issue that exists, that is impacting so many people, then yeah, that's the idea. May God guide our youth. And our intention is, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, ask, guidance, for them, so that He rectifies their affairs, right? Again, the du'as, they're all the same, they're there. But what's the intention behind it? That's what we're being asked to check here. What is your intention behind it?
Just on this chapter, I know that we studied this text. This is probably the most shocking part of the entire book. Like in my life, I know probably what two people live up to this standard. I mean, and I'm not one of them.
Yeah.
So it's almost scary in terms of how, how much Imam al-Ghazali speaks about this, but obviously he's basing this on the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. From the example of a few of the companions that Sayyidina Abu Bakr used to, he had a rock in his mouth for 7 years, so that he wouldn't speak. So I just.
It's a reminder, yeah.
The sister's mentioning that this, we're people of dunya, like we live in the dunya, we act in the dunya, we're in workplaces, we're in, personal capacity, whatever it may be.
Yep.
It just seems like so overwhelming that the only thing you can do is just shut up for the rest of your life.
Well, that's what the Prophet told us, right? He told us, "Man kana yu'minu billahi wal yawm al-akhir, falyaqul khayran aw liyasmut." Right? So whoever believes in Allah on the Day of Judgment, let him say only that which is good, or remain silent. That should be, by the way, our default. Silence. And we only speak when there is a benefit to be acquired from. That's how our Prophet ﷺ was. Right? That in the Shama'il, we're reading through it, right? That he would not say anything unless there was a benefit to be derived from it. That's the way of our Prophet ﷺ. He would not say anything. Kana asmatan nas. That's how he was described in one description, that he was the most silent of people. Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Because he has a full understanding and knowledge of the impacts of what it is that people say. So he's not going to say anything unless there is a purpose behind it. And if that purpose is not attached to Allah in any way, shape, or form, you don't say it. Right? And it's a lofty, that's a very lofty station. And it counters. I mean, that's why it's like, if Allah were to take us to account for everything that we do, none of us would survive. We'd all be finished, right? But وَيَعْفُ عَنْ كَثِيرٍ. He overlooks so much. So it's like, let's balance the fear with the hope as well, right? But the idea here is, don't have too much hope where you take this for granted and then you let your tongues fly and say whatever you want to say, and at the end of the day there's no consequence or impact or repercussions from that. We can't do that. Like, we really have to be, cognizant of what it is that we're saying, and in order to protect our tongues. And that's why, he began this. It's like to say that, hold on to your tongue. Like, just be aware of what it is that you're saying, right? And don't become heedless of these things. So he goes on to say with the backbiting, he said that, for indeed this insinuation, the one that was mentioned before, just about, Allah rectify him, أصلح الله شأنه, or, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, rectify him. أصلحه الله. For indeed this insinuation is a combination of two reprehensible acts. One is backbiting, since the other person understands the point being made, and the other is considering yourself virtuous and praising yourself by passing a judgment of evil on another and expressing righteousness for yourself. How many people fall into this trap of self-righteousness, right? Where it's just like, if I say, oh, Allahumma hadi, Allah aslah Allah sha'nahu, yes, oh, Allah guide him and rectify him and whatnot, and then it's like inside it's like, yeah, I'm feeling good about myself. Poor bloke, he's doing this and that, and right, and making all these sins, and here I am. I'm preserved and I'm free of that. A'udhu billah. Ask Allah for salam and afiyah. That's like there's something going on at the level of the heart. It's not good. It's unhealthy, and it can actually lead to your own destruction.
Just a question on this, because even at last night's gathering when the families were here, we were speaking about this concept of ta'lim and tabiyah. Right? And many of us went through a lot of ta'lim.
Right.
We read a lot of books, but there's this whole missing element. So you reach a certain stage in your life and you're like, well, we've read a lot and we've learned the deen, and we've probably, but there's this whole tabiyah element that was just
Missing.
Yeah. And now it's like you have to, and then there's a scary hadith, saying that actually remember that is by 8 40, rectify your state, or your goodness doesn't overtake your
Right.
the ill within you, then prepare for
Yeah.
prepare for hellfire.
Yeah.
Like, how do you, like, people who are in this state, like, now begin reversing this, like?
So again, just as you got into that state over a long period of time, then you reverse it incrementally as well, right? Because if you try, to think about, oh my God, like I've been doing all this for so long and I've been missing on this, etc., etc., you'll give up. It'll just overwhelm you, and you won't be able to handle that, because it's just like, I've done so much. So that's where you need the extra dosage of hope in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in the sense of, no, I still have a chance. Start with my intention. Let me consider my actions. Let me be more cognizant of what it is that I say. Let me, set foot on this path to change myself, even if incrementally, right? Because, to try to do this revolution of one's nafs, right, can actually overwhelm oneself. And you won't be able to handle it. And then you just fall into states of despair and give up and say, well, forget it. I'm destined for the fire. It's over for me, right? And that's a sin, by the way, right? To despair in the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it's very prescriptive. When the Prophet ﷺ, would give Sahaba what they needed, right? If they needed an extra dose of hope, he'll give it to them, right? To reconcile their hearts, to make their faith firm, right? But for somebody who's they're already in a good state, but they need to get into a better state, then that's where sometimes the prescription of ru'b, of putting in some element of fear would be there. I mean, we know Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, he would say that I wish that I were a blade of grass, so that I would not have to stand before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and go through the reckoning on the Day of Judgment. It's Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala. And now we think, oh my God, this is Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, and so where are we, right? But that's his state in terms of his level of iman and his knowledge and understanding of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and his practice, right? completely, totally different level, right? But you know, in our states, yeah, I mean, we're not in a good state, generally speaking, but that is no reason for us to lose hope or to give up. The whole point of this, and I said this at the very beginning, the whole point of this is so that you change, right? It's like I realize my state so that I can do something about it, not so that I can give up, right? It's so that I can actually do something about it and change, even if incrementally. So get on that path of change, even if incrementally. I mean, how many of us were thinking about these things before we read through the book? Right? But now, alhamdulillah, all right, so now I got something to do that I'm responsible for. And that's a blessing from Allah. Allah is giving this message to us so that we do something about it. Right? And that we should give us a sense of hope, that Allah wants us to rectify ourselves. He wants us to change, subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so he goes on to say, if you were really concerned about him, the one that you made dua for, aslahallahu, right? Aslahahullah. The proof of that would have been that you would have not have desired to disgrace him or reveal his faults, right? And so he said, before that. However, if your true intention in saying, may Allah rectify him, is supplication, then do supplicate him, for him, but silently. Nobody has to hear your supplication, right? If you're really concerned about him, the proof of that would have been that you would have not have desired to disgrace him or reveal his faults. However, your display of concern over his fault is in reality a display of his fault, right? That's why, you know, there's a statement that says, you know, النصيحة في ملأ فضيحة, right? That giving counsel in a group of people, right? Even if it's just one other person, giving counsel to somebody else, right? In a group that, okay, if I want to talk to somebody privately and, you know, address their issue or whatnot and try to help them, that's between me and this individual, right? But if I end up, you know, saying something about a person in a group and thinking that, oh, here I am giving counsel or advice to somebody, this is not a counsel or advice. This is exposing. I'm exposing their faults. النصيحة في ملأ فضيحة, right? So be aware of that. Sufficient as a deterrent for you against backbiting are the words of Allah, Majestic, Most High. وَلَا يَغْتَبْ بَعْضُكُمْ بَعْضًا أَيُحِبُّ أَحَدُكُمْ أَنْ يَأْكُلَ لَحْمَ أَخِيهِ مَيْتًا فَكَرِهْتُمُوهُ. That's the reality of backbiting. And let not some of you backbite others. Would any of you like to eat the flesh of his dead brother? No, you would truly despise that. I mean, just take a moment to think about that. Like if somebody were to give you a plate that had dead human flesh on it and said, eat, what would your reaction be? Like any person of sound mind, what's their reaction going to be? It's like, oh my God, is that like a human piece of flesh, right? Disgusting. Like, oh my God, it's repulsive, you know? Raw meat of a human being, dead, and it's in front of you. That's the reality of backbiting. It's like you take that piece of meat, you take it, chew it, swallow it. That's the reality of that sin. So if we have that connection, and we make that connection with the reality of that sin, you'll avoid it. Because just as you would avoid somebody offering you a piece of human flesh on a plate, right, to eat it, you're going to avoid that. Not only the plate, the person who presented it to you. You're going to avoid them like the plague, right? That's the reality of that reaction. Well, why isn't it we don't treat it in the same way when we backbite? It's because we're disconnected from that reality. And realize, and I've said this so many times, all of our actions, they have a reality to them, good or bad. And these realities don't become manifest until the day of judgment. So the idea is connect yourself with those realities here and now before that day. So that you know the good that you're doing worth mountains of hasanat with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? And the bad that you do also possibly is worth, you know, so many sins with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But again, the generosity of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is such that you do one hasanah, you get 10. automatically. At least 10. It could be from 10 to 70 to 700. And especially during the month of Ramadan, it's even more so, right? Even multiplied even more and more so, right? And that's for all the good deeds that you do. So strive to do good deeds. Build up your account. Whereas if you do a bad deed, it's the sayyah. That's what you get, right? With justice, nothing more, you know. But again, we don't know sometimes the reality of these sins, and that's where the problem lies, is that I don't understand how egregious that transgression is in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? And so the shaitan, his game is to deceive people so that makes things look like they're nice and, you know, flowery and, you know, so everything is fine and dandy, and at the end, inna Allah ghafurur rahim. Well, yeah, inna Allah ghafurur rahim, but you have to do your part, right? You can't just, you know, and this is something that Imam Nawawi Imam Al-Ghazali will talk about after, so we'll put that off for a moment. Indeed, Allah likens you to eating, to one eating the flesh of the dead. How appropriate is it then for you to be on your guard against such a thing? There is a matter which would stop you from backbiting against Muslims, were you to ponder it. Turn to yourself and consider. Is there no flaw in you, apparent or hidden? Are you committing any act of disobedience, open or hidden? If you know this to be so about yourself, know also that the other person's inability to free himself from what you have ascribed to him is the same as your own, and his excuse is the same as yours. So this idea of put yourself in their shoes, right? That's like, you know, well, if you don't realize your own imperfections, then that's a big problem. But if you're able to realize your imperfections, those same imperfections that you're talking about in other people, see them within yourself. Realize them yourself so that you stop talking about it. So that it's not like something that you end up, it's like an exposing of yourself at the end of the day, right? So just as you hate to be shamed and your faults to be mentioned, so too does he. It's the golden rule. Treat people as you want to be treated yourself, right? No one of you truly believes until he loves for his brother what he loves for himself. Yet if you conceal his faults, Allah Most High will conceal yours. So it works both ways. If, however, you disgrace him, Allah will let loose upon you sharp tongues, ruining your honor in this world. Then Allah Most High will shame you in the hereafter in front of all of creation. That's that hadith that I had mentioned to you, right? That whoever looks for the faults of others, Allah will expose their faults. If you have looked at the outward and inward aspects of yourself and not found any flaw or deficiency, neither in religious nor worldly affairs, then know that your ignorance of your own flaws is the vilest type of stupidity. And there is no greater flaw than stupidity, right? This is like muntaha jahli, right? That, you know, and he says, غاية غباوتك. That this is like the utmost extreme of ghaba, of stupidity, right? Because at the end of the day, you know, that ignorance which leads to your stupidity is going to be your downfall. It's going to be the end of you. It's going to destroy you, because it's like, you know, they say ignorance is bliss, right? Not in our tradition, right? Not in our tradition. Ignorance is not bliss. Ignorance is something that can truly ruin you, right? And it's the worst form, as he's indicating here, that you don't see these flaws in yourself, right? Every time you're pointing it out in other people, and you don't put a mirror up in front of yourself to see that this is something that exists within you. Here you are, you're pointing it out in others, but yet you have it in you, right? Remove the log out of your own eye before you take the splint out of the eye of another person, right? You know, so it's stupidity. It's the utmost stupidity. If Allah Most High wills good for you, then He will give you the ability to see your faults. Looking at yourself with an eye of satisfaction is the height of foolishness and the epitome of ignorance, right? So this idea of being content with oneself, right? It's like, I'm fine, nothing's wrong with me, right? And then you just mosey on your way and thinking, you know, everything will be fine. you're in for a rude awakening. We will all be in for a rude awakening before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the Day of Judgment, when those realities that we were ignorant of, that we were heedless of, become manifest. If, however, you are truthful and sincere in your opinion, then show gratitude to Allah Most High. Do not ruin this blessing by slandering others and sullying their reputations, for that is one of the greatest of faults. Number 3. Now we go to number 4. الرابع المراء والجدال ومناقشة الناس في كلامهم. So disputation, argumentation, and competitive debate with people. So here, what's the definition of mira, which is which is translated here as disputation? Al-mira, it has to do, and this is from Imam al-Ghazali's Ihya. He says, وهو كل اعتراض على كلام الغير بإظهار خلل فيه. So it's like, when a person speaks and then you go against them in order to show the flaws of what they're saying, right? اعتراض على كلام الغير, that you want to dispute with others, or you want to show that they have a deficiency in what they're saying, right? And so then I go against it, right? That I either protest, or I go against it, the words of other people, in order so that I can show the deficiencies in it. That's mira. Okay. Jadal has to do with putting forth proofs with another proof in terms of dispute, like when I'm trying to argue with somebody in order to show that, okay, well, no, here's a proof that indicates that this is right and that what you have offered is not. So jadal can be both praiseworthy and blameworthy. Allah tells us in the Quran, وَجَادِلْهُمْ بِالَّتِي هِيَ أَحْسَنُ, right? That have dispute with them in a manner that which is best. Based on what? Based on what is the truth, right? But then there is also jadal that is mazmum, right? وَكَانَ الْإِنسَانُ أَكْثَرَ شَيْءٍ جَدَلًا, and that the human being is very much so, one who argues, right? One just wants to argue. And then competitive debate with people is munaqashat an-nas fil kalam. So these things entail harming the one being addressed, making him feel ignorant and criticizing him, as well as praising oneself and attesting to one's own superiority in both intelligence and knowledge. Right? So when you enter in debate, what's the purpose behind it? What's the point? Is it to show how wise and intelligent and how much knowledge you have, and to be able to show the stupidity of the other person or how incoherent they are? If that's your intention, that's what it's talking about here. That's what this is talking about. We know the famous statement of Imam al-Shafi'i, that whenever he would enter into a debate with another person, that he would ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the truth to be manifested on their tongue, so that he could surrender to it. That's to show there's no portion for the self. The ego has no portion in this whatsoever. It's not about you. This is about Allah. And He is al-haq. He is the truth. The true one. The truth. So this is what it's about at the end of the day. But if it's about putting down others or showing off your skills or, right, then it's a problem. So even when it comes to like debating or getting the skill of being able to debate with others, it is a skill, right? You have to check your intention, So people who want to join these debate clubs or whatever, right? It's a skill, but check your intention. Why are you doing this? Is it for the sake of argumentation, debate for the sake of debate? If it's about sophistry, right? Just using your words to be able to overcome other people, right? So that you can feel good about yourself. A'udhu billah. It's a trap, right? We seek refuge in Allah from that. This should be about truth and only about the truth. It is only about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Moreover, these things disturb the clarity and peace in your life, because if you debate with a fool, he will annoy you. And if you debate with a more intelligent person, he will disdain and detest you. The Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he said, "Man taraka al-mira'a wa huwa mubtilun, bana Allahu lahu baytan fi rabad al-jannah. Wa man taraka al-mira'a wa huwa muhiqqun, bana Allahu lahu baytan fi a'la al-jannah." So this is amazing. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, whoever leaves a quarrel while he's in the wrong, leaving it for the sake of Allah, Allah will build him a house on the outskirts of paradise, fi rabab al-jannah. And then whoever leaves a quarrel, mira, this disputation, while he is right, while he is in the right, Allah will build him a house in the highest part of paradise. So the question that you ask yourself, who is this about? Why am I doing what I'm doing? Always, always, always ask ourselves that question. Who is this about? If the nafs has a portion in it, then you're doing yourself a disservice. You should not allow Satan to deceive you when he says, speak the truth clearly and do not dissemble. Satan is always trying to entice foolish people to evil by presenting it to them as goodness. This is the, وَزَيَّنَ لَهُمُ الشَّيْطَانُ أَعْمَالَهُم, that this is the shaitan ornamenting,
people's actions as being good. Do not become a laughing stock of Satan. He's only doing it to laugh at you, right? He's making fun of you. This is shaitan. Like he wants you to see the things that you're doing as being good, so that he can laugh at you at the end of the day and drag you with him into the fire. He knows where he is going, and he's going to drag as many of us as possible with him, as from humanity, right? And so do not become a laughing stock of shaitan, letting him ridicule you. Making the truth clear is a good thing when done with somebody who will accept it from you. This is best accomplished by way of honest, sincere counsel, not disputation. In offering such counsel, there is a proper form and manner. وَجَادِلْهُمْ بِالَّتِي هِيَ أَحْسَنُ. Dispute with them in the manner that is best. And it requires gentleness, courtesy. Otherwise, it turns to humiliation of the other person, and its evil outweighs its good. Whoever associates with the pseudo-jurists of his time will find his nature increasingly dominated by disputation and silence becoming difficult for him. And this is something that's part of human nature. People who they end up getting these platforms publicly, and nowadays, especially with all the different social media platforms and whatnot, where people they get all these different followers for the statements that they're saying, and that they're controversial, and then they cause people to get into disputes, and then so that a person can show how intelligent their arguments are, etc., etc. A lot of that is happening. There's a lot of that's happening and going on these days, right? And so here, it's a warning, right? That silence becomes more difficult for individuals because they have a platform. People are listening. They have so many followers, right? And then their egos are being fed, right? This is because corrupt scholars have influenced him to believe that such disputation bears merit, and that skill in argumentation and competitive debate is indeed what earns him praise. Flee from these scholars as you would from a lion. Flee from these scholars, from these individuals, whoever they are, as you would from a lion. And know that such disputation is a means of incurring the hatred of both Allah and creation. It's a no-win battle, right? But you're not gaining anything whatsoever, other than the hatred of Allah and His creation. Number 5, ascribing goodness to oneself. Now, this is where we're talking about in terms of, the question that you had about, human resources and whatnot, right? This is where the context of that comes in. Indeed, Allah Most High says, do not ascribe goodness to yourselves. He is more knowing of the one who is God-fearing. فَلَا تُزَكُّوا أَنفُسَكُمْ هُوَ أَعْلَمُ بِمَنِ اتَّقَى. And then so he goes on to say that a sage, a wise person, was once asked, what is something true yet vile? And he's responded, a person praising himself, right? So when a person sort of toots their own horn, right? So beware of getting accustomed to doing this. Know also that it decreases the esteem in which people hold you and causes you to be detested by Allah, the Magnificent and Majestic. So there's a note that the translator puts, and he's quoting Imam an-Nawawi. So I want you to listen to this, and you have it in the book so that you can go back and read it. He said, rahimahullah, know that a person mentions his goodness in two ways, one liked and the other not. The disliked way is for him to mention his goodness out of pride, to show himself to be higher and distinguished over others and for similar purposes. The liked way, this is the good one, is for the one in which there is a religious benefit, as when this person is commanding good or forbidding evil, advising or counseling, teaching or nurturing somebody and imparting to him proper manners, adab, exhorting him or reminding, reconciling two people, or defending himself against evil or things of this sort. For example, in obtaining employment, such that he is obliged to mention his virtues for the intention of helping people accept and rely on what he has to say. For instance, for a scholar to say, these points I am imparting to you, you will not find with anyone else, so hold on to them and value them. So he's not praising himself, the one who's saying that, even though it is a praise, but the point is that, Allah has given me something that He hasn't given to others, and that I'm imparting that. So this is from min bab وَأَمَّا بِنِعْمَةِ رَبِّكَ فَحَدِّثْ. As for the blessings of Allah, speak about them, right? And so if there are blessings that Allah has given to you, then speak about them. Not for the sake of seeing yourself above others, or to have the sense of pride, or to show how good you are and how deficient others are. No, if that's the case, then it's the blameworthy type of praising oneself, right? And so this is something that you can go back, and that's Imam Nawawi's words, and it's in the note in the back of the book. If you wish to understand how praising yourself does not increase you in esteem with others, consider how you feel when your contemporaries praise themselves for their merits, rank, and wealth, how your heart disapproves of it, how your nature finds it unbearable, and how once you are away from them, you criticize them for it. So again, it's like putting yourself into the other people's shoes when they, like if other people are doing it, they're praising themselves and they're tooting their own horn, etc., etc., and it's all about showing how wonderful and great and intelligent and wise that they are, right? And you feel like an idiot, right? I mean, put yourself in that position. Whereas that's how you look towards other people when you start praising yourself and saying all these things that you do. And realize part of this, and really actually it's the crux of it, is you fail to see the one who gave you these things in the first place, right? That there's that disconnect. You don't see that whatever good that you have, whatever praiseworthy qualities that have been given to you, they were given to you by Allah. So don't lose sight of that, right? You didn't have anything to do with it. Yes, you're making a choice. Yes, you put in the effort. Yes, you strive, right? But who is the one who gave you that capacity to put in the effort, to strive, to gain these gifts or blessings or whatever? So you acknowledge them as blessings from Allah, and that's the intent. And you knowledge that you have been given. It's given to you by Allah, right? And so it always goes back to the Mu'ti, subhanahu wa ta'ala. You should realize that when you praise yourself, they too revile you in their hearts while they are with you, and then when they are apart from you, give voice to their feelings. All right, two more. Number 6, cursing. Take care never to curse anything that Allah Most High has created, whether an animal or a type of food or a particular person. Not to swear that one of the people of the Qibla is guilty of associating partners with Allah, or of disbelief, or of hypocrisy. Indeed, the only one who sees the secrets of the hearts is Allah Most High, so do not come between Allah Most High and His slaves. So the idea of cursing, al-la'n, it has to do with, la'n, the definition of it is being far from the mercy of Allah. That's la'n, right? And so when you're saying to somebody that, la'natullah alayh, right, that may Allah's curse be upon them, it means that maybe they be distant from the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? And so he goes on to say that, know that on the day of judgment, you will not be asked, why did you not curse or insult so-and-so? There's no benefit to be derived from that, right? Or why were you silent regarding so-and-so? Moreover, now listen to this, what he says. If you never once in your life, in your entire life, curse Iblis, or even make mention of him, you would not be questioned about it, right? Think about that for a second. There is no benefit in cursing Iblis. So if somebody had like a subha, and they said, La'anatullah ala Iblis, La'anatullah ala Iblis, La'anatullah, right? And they did that. There's no benefit derived from it. Is it true? Absolutely it's true. It's in the Quran. He's mal'oon. There's no question about it. Nobody is more mal'oon than Iblis. But the point of what he's trying to say here is don't let your tongues get used to cursing others, right? Because there's no benefit to be derived in that. You don't get hasanat for cursing Iblis, right? You understand he is accursed, so that he is an enemy, and I'm not going to follow what he is making suggestions for me to do, right? The waswas. I'm not going to follow him, right? I'm not going to follow in his footsteps. He's mal'oon. I get it. It's real. It's haqq. Allah has said it. He's mal'oon. But the point of what Imam al-Ghazali is saying is that you don't get any reward for cursing him. There's no ajr in it. That's the reality. I don't get reward for cursing Iblis. That's why we don't take the subha and say 100 times la'natullah ala Iblis. There's no benefit. There's no reward in it, right? So even if you don't make mention, you won't be questioned about it. Allah's not going to ask you about that. It's not something that is farad, it's not wajib, it's not even, mustahab or mandub, is to utter curses against him or anyone else who is accursed, right? That, they're accursed, we get it. They're accursed. And so why are they accursed and we're being told that they're accursed? So that we don't follow in their footsteps. That's the reason, right? But it's not so that we continue to curse them on our tongues. But if you curse somebody, you will be held responsible for it and questioned about it. There's a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ in which he said that whenever a curse is uttered on something, in the heavens and the earth, could be a person, could be an animal, could be something, right? That curse it goes to seek where it's going to stick to, right? And so it'll go and it will search to see what is worthy of being cursed based on what you said, right? And then it goes to that object that was cursed. If that object is worthy of being cursed, it sticks to it. But if it doesn't, guess what happens? It comes back to you, and it sticks with you, right? That's the end result. So if you say a curse, and the thing that you say a curse about is not worthy of it, is not deserving of it, it comes right back to you, right? And I mean, this is something that to show the Prophet said in one time, there was a Sahaba who he was riding on a camel and he cursed the camel, right? And because it was giving him a hard time. So the Prophet ﷺ, he commanded, he said, take everything off of that camel. You're not allowed to benefit from it whatsoever. إِنَّهَا مَلْعُونَةٌ. It was cursed. So just leave it. Let it go. ذَرُوهَا فَإِنَّهَا مَلْعُونَةٌ. Right? And the Prophet ﷺ is teaching a lesson to the Sahaba. And they would see that camel just roaming and doing its own thing, right? But no one was allowed to benefit from that camel whatsoever because that Sahaba said that statement, that he cursed it. So it's a lesson to show. Was that camel cursed? Not necessarily, right? In the sense of, but the Prophet ﷺ, when he's saying, فَإِنَّهَا مَلْعُونَةٌ, that it was cursed, meaning that somebody cursed it. So be aware of what it is that you say. Don't say these things, right? Because it has an impact. And that it's something that can have an effect on you. Do not find fault in anything in Allah's creation. For the Messenger of Allah ﷺ never once criticized food that was not good. Rather, if he liked the food, he would eat it, and if not, then he would leave it. And this is based on a hadith of Sahih Muslim. And there are so many hadiths that in the Shamal of Imam al-Tirmidhi, the Shamal Muhammadiyah, that speak about the Prophet ﷺ and how he would treat food. Right? He never cursed it, never criticized it, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But rather that if he liked it, he would eat from it. If he didn't, he would leave it. Supplication against creation. Restrain your tongue from supplicating against any of the creatures of Allah Most High, even if he has wronged you. Consign the matter to Allah Most High. As the hadith says, verily the oppressed one prays against his oppressor until he takes his right. Then continues to the point where the oppressor has a claim over him, which he will demand on the Day of Judgment. So Imam al-Nawawi, he makes a note that to make dua against somebody who has wronged you is something that is mandub, it's not mandub, it's permissible, it's mubah, but it's better not to do it, right? The note, it says it is permissible to pray against somebody who wrongs you or wrongs someone else, as Imam Nawawi has said, against one who violates a rule of the Sharia, right? So again, what's the haqq here? It's about the laws of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Sharia. But then he goes on to say, it is better, however, to leave praying against one who wrongs you. That's the higher road, right? The Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, one who prays against a person who wronged him has been avenged. So you pray, make dua against an oppressor or that one who has wronged you, then he's been avenged. Examples of cursing and praying against someone are phrases like, قَاتَلَهُ اللَّهُ, may Allah fight with him, and may Allah, take vengeance against him, Allah يَنْتَقَ مِنْهُ, and these types of things. So Imam al-Ghazali, again, the point of this is so that we're vigilant of what's going on our hearts. We don't want to do things that would lead to our hearts being in a bad state. A person once spoke out at length against Hajjaj ibn Yusuf, and one of the pious predecessors said to him, Allah will take vengeance for Hajjaj against those who attacked him verbally, just as he will take vengeance against Hajjaj for those whom he had oppressed. Right? So it's just to be aware that, like if we go overboard with that or we do that, we're putting ourselves at risk. And then the last thing is guard your tongue from jesting, ridiculing, and making fun of people. Mizah, sukhriya, wal istihza' bin nas. Guard your tongue from these vices, for they make you lose face, diminish people's respect for you, cause people to have an aversion from you, and damage hearts. They are a source of obstinate disputation and falling out with one another, and they sow hatred in the heart. So do not make fun of anyone. If someone else makes fun of you, do not respond, and turn away from them until they talk about something else. Be of those who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes when they pass by idle talk, they pass by with dignity. وَإِذَا مَرُّوا بِاللَّغْوِ مَرُّوا كِرَامًا. Right? So this is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is His advice. So these 8 then comprise the calamities of the tongue. Nothing will help you against them except solitude or forcing yourself to be silent, only speaking when necessary. Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu anhu used to put a stone in his mouth which would prevent him from speaking except when necessary. He would point to his tongue and say, "This is what has brought troubles upon me." So be on guard against your tongue and to your utmost ability, for it is the greatest means of your destruction in this world and in the next. So we'll stop there. We didn't finish going through the rest of the limbs, but we'll finish next time. There are only 3.5 pages left in this chapter. But what's left is the stomach, the private parts, the hand, the feet, and those are much shorter sections, and then the conclusion of this section. So inshallah we'll stop at that. If there are any questions, then we can answer them, and if not, then we can conclude inshallah. Yes. Right. No, it says Imam Nawawi says it's permissible. You can, right? But he's saying it's better not to. It's like taking the higher road. Because look, don't think that Allah is unaware of these things. And we know, that the Prophet ﷺ, he indicated that, that dua al-madlum mustajab, right? That the dua of the oppressed is something that is answered. Is that indicating the ideal? If you're oppressed, to make dua against the oppressor? Is it indicating the ideal? No, it's not the ideal. You can do it, and it's haqq, and Allah, will. But based on that other hadith, that when you make that dua, then that's the vengeance that you get, right? Allah, that the avenging that you get is based on you making the dua, right? So that that's your haqq. You're getting it back. Right, in terms of, because Allah will take care of them, on the day of judgment, right? But this is something that, again, one who prays against a person who wronged him has been avenged. One who prays against a person who wronged him, your dua against them, that's you've been avenged, right? That you've gotten, your sort of your due in through that, making that dua. Of course, everything will be settled on the day of judgment. Right? But what it's saying here is that the higher course of action is to leave making the dua against others. That's the ideal. And the Prophet ﷺ, when he was wrong, right, he didn't make dua against his people. He did the opposite. He said, Allahumma hadi qawmi fa innahum la ya'lamun. You want the sunnah? That's the sunnah. Right? That those people who are doing him wrong. Right? Again, it's not about not acknowledging the wrong or the oppression. No, it's wrong. It's oppression. There's no question about it. We understand. This is, what they're doing is wrong, right? And so then what is the way that you can help them? By stopping them from their oppression, right? But if it's outside of your capacity and you can't, and people are being in wrong, right? Then, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to remove the wrong by stopping the oppressors through what? Through guidance. By guiding them. That's the ideal at the end of the day. When the Prophet ﷺ was given the choice to destroy, his people, right? The Quraysh, that the angel was sent and, يطبع الأخشبين عليهم, that the two mountains of Abu Qubais and Qunayqa in Mecca to be crumbling on the Meccans or the Quraysh. And the Prophet ﷺ said no. Maybe that there will have, from their progeny, there will be people who will worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? Same thing in Uhud, when he was hit and he was injured and his face was bloody and his tooth was broken, his blessed tooth, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And the Sahaba were frustrated. Said, Ya Rasul, all you have to do is make dua against them. And that's it. Their affair will be done. Allah will take care of them, will destroy them. Right? And he said, I was sent as a rahmah. I was sent as a rahmah for people, not as to curse them, right? Not as a la'an. And then he goes on and he makes his dua, Allahumma hadi qawmi fa innahum la ya'lamun. Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Oh Allah, guide them, for they do not know. Right. Right. Yeah. Right. Right. Yeah. So regarding the first question, can you backbite a nation? There are instances in which backbiting is deemed permissible, right? Imam an-Nawawi rahimahullah, he talks of the different exceptions, and one of them is to point out the evil of somebody who is not concealing it. Okay, so if there's somebody who is doing evil and is causing harm, and they have no qualms about it whatsoever, they're doing it openly, then it's permissible for me to say that person there, that nation there, whatever, that the harm that they're causing, the oppression, that be warned, right? And with the intention and the purpose of warning others against that evil, so that they avoid it. Because at the end of the day, it's about stopping harm, right? Ad-darar yuzal. This is a principle in usul, is that harm should be removed, right? And so then if there are people who are doing it and they have no qualms about it and they're doing it openly, then you warn against that, right? And that's not considered. There are exceptions, yes. There are exceptions, right? Yeah, just like lying, right? There are exceptions to lying as well, right? Like in war, or if there's an oppressor that is coming and that he's after somebody that is being oppressed by this oppressor, right? And they're hiding with you. And they come and they say, you know where this person is, right? It's like, oh, wait a minute, I'm not allowed to lie, I'm Muslim, and so I say he's in, right? No, you lie. You say, he's not here, I don't know where he is, right? Straight up. Why? Because you know that there's going to be a greater harm, that this oppressor is going to come and harm this person and kill them or whatever, right? Or to steal, right? That somebody is going to misappropriate wealth, and they're coming to steal money, and you have it's hidden. It's like, where's the money? I don't know. And you do know. That's okay. Why? Because that person is going to commit a greater wrong. They're going to commit an act of injustice by doing that. So in those cases, you lie, right? In that regard. Same thing with backbiting, right? Is that there are instances in which backbiting is considered or deemed as permissible. And Imam an-Nawawi goes into detail in his Kitab al-Adhkar for both lying and for backbiting as well. That the time where it becomes permissible to backbite, right? So such as, for example, redressing a grievance. I have a grievance, and the only way that I can redress that grievance is by mentioning so and so did this to me. Now, if that person were to hear me saying so and so did this to me, they're not going to like it. So that falls in the definition of backbiting, right? That I'm mentioning him in a way that if they were to hear it, they wouldn't like it. But there's an exception there. Why? Is because I'm redressing a grievance. Somebody wronged me, and I need to ask about it, right? Or even asking for like a fatwa, ifta, right? That such and such a person did something to me, right? What's the fatwa regarding that? I don't understand the ruling, right? So that again, there's another exception. It's permissible, it's considered. It falls in the definition of ghiba as backbiting, but there is a greater good to be served from that, and so that's where that exception comes in. Same, with a family member, you don't cut off ties, but again, if you're in a majlis where they're listening, like where they're saying things and you're listening to it, right? You make it clear. You say that, look, I with compassion, with kindness, with dignity, so that it's like I have care for you, I have concern for you, I don't want this harm to come on you, but I please change the subject, or I'm going to have to take my leave, right? And so they'll get the message eventually. Like every time if you're in the and they start backbiting, like so and so, I care for you, I love you, but I'm sorry, I can't sit here and listen to that. This is something that is wrong, and give them that counsel and advice.
But eventually it might lead to like a space.
Then but as long as if they're relatives, it's not like a cut, right? Space, okay, no problem. If that's what it takes, then we take our space. But it's for their benefit as well. Like I'm not going to sit and listen to somebody backbite someone else, and it's like I'll just be silent and not say anything. Because if I'm listening, I'm partaking in that. I don't want sin, right?
So if you're listening to it, you're partaking.
Yes. You're silent. That's the thing. You're partaking in it, right? So the idea would be, well, look, it's like like go and say, I was going through this book by Imam al-Ghazali, and he was talking about these things. Here's a section that is I think it might be a benefit. Right? Let's read through it.
Office chatter, for example, is huge.
Yeah, it's all gossip. Yeah. So yeah, like. Yeah, put your earphones on and listen to a lecture that's going to be a benefit for you or something like that. Just, create your own space, right? I know it's tough, but look, at the end of the day, like, what's at stake here? Our akhirah. That's the reality of it. That's what's at stake. It's not being, saying like, be unwise about it. No, be wise about it, and try to be creative. Come up with your own creative solutions in this regard, right? Take your breaks at different times or something like that, or I have to go and perform. Got to use the bathroom, or I got to go perform my prayer or something like that, right? Be creative, and just and be kind, right? Like out of compassion and consideration towards others. Remember, what their choices that they're making, they're responsible for. It's not on you. But I don't want to take a part in that.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think initially it's very difficult.
Oh yeah.
You're in a social dynamic.
Yep.
Just grab it when people are doing that. I'm always seeing that people who do take a stance and say, look, I'm just crossing into a boundary that we can't be in, they're really, really respected.
Yes.
I know a brother who said Rahan, he's based in the UK. He's just so solid on this that it's non-compromising.
Right.
Never, ever, ever. And I've worked in a personal, professional capacity, never heard him say something ill about someone.
Subhanallah.
The only time that a group of people were with him and they said something, he just stopped them right away. And it was silent for about 3 to 5 seconds, and then everybody just got on with it.
Right. Right.
So,
right.
There is strength, but of course it does require a lot of courage to
and refinement, right? Self-refinement. Because why is it that people do these things? It's because there's a lack of refinement of the nafs, and that's what this is about. At the end of the day, is that this journey, we want to place ourselves on a journey where we're able to take control of our nafs and not let our nafs be in control of us, right? So it's all about that purification. And Ramadan, again, is that beautiful time for purification, that time for spiritual attunement and fine-tuning and refinement and all that and more, right? So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us the tawfiq to be able to refine ourselves to that which is pleasing to Him, so that we reach a state of being a nafs al-mutma'inna, right? The nafs that is at ease, because it is in alignment with what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has revealed, and it is in alignment with the guidance of our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر وصلى اللهم على سيدنا محمد في الأولين وصلى اللهم على سيدنا محمد في الآخرين وصلى اللهم على سيدنا محمد في الملأ الأعلى إلى يوم الدين وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين.